I've seen a lot of changes since my daughter was diagnosed in 2010. And I know a lot of things seem like they stayed the same, but believe me, there have been a lot of changes, a lot of new learning, a lot of improvement. But it happens because people advocate. Somebody calls attention to something, or somebody gets somebody interested, and things start spiraling. So, one person can make a change, and that is each one of you. So always keep that in mind. You're affected. You can make a change. You can call attention to things. Whenever I go to a doctor, I say, what do you know about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? Even if I'm going to a doctor with my 97-year-old mother, and just talk to them a little bit. And, just do what you can to get some wheels in motion. If you belong to a group, some kind of social group, or, book club or whatever, see if you can do a little something to get people interested here and there, and draw people in to travel that journey with you. And maybe, one person talks to another, and before you know it, things start to happen. So we have our meetings typically every 3 months, but we want to wait till the interns are down for the genetics lab. So our next meeting won't be until probably June 6th. But we are planning to have a patient-to-patient get-together. We're going to do it at Susan Chilella's office on a Saturday morning. And I think we talked about probably March 23rd. So we'll send out a notice to confirm that with everybody. But just come on out on a Saturday morning. We'll probably do it like around 10:30 or whatever works for Susan's office. And get together and find community and support each other. One thing in this journey, it's difficult. You don't want to travel alone. So any opportunity to seek out other people and get together and find support and support others is important. We also, I think many of you are aware, we have our Unite for Answers event. We had one this past September, and it was great. It's a great time. We have music, we have food, we have games, and it ends in a 1-mile walk. And it's just a couple hours where everybody can come out and just hang out and enjoy other people who get it, and you can create your team and get your family, your friends to sponsor you and join your team and give a donation. We have raffles, so anybody who's interested in seeking out raffles, we always appreciate that help. We're going to do it again this fall. We don't have an exact date yet, but we're looking at possibly sometime in October. So we'll keep everybody informed as we move along to let you know when we're going to do that. We always appreciate help with setup, takedown, contributions, raffles, whatever. And it's really interesting. The more you ask people to donate, the more you ask businesses to donate something for a raffle, well, what is this about? And it's surprising. A lot of times you meet somebody who knows somebody, and that person might not even know that we have this group. So it's another way of being an advocate and help to change things for you and for other people. So I just wanted to let you know about those things. So we're going to have Dorothy Poppe come up and tell us about some of the things that are going on with the Bobby Jones CSF. A lot of people get confused because it's Chiari-Syringomyelia Foundation, but it's and other related disorders. So it includes many, many things, including EDS. So thanks, Dorothy.
Thank you. So I just want to start by thanking Nancy, who really is an amazing advocate and leader down here for all of us. So I think we should give her a big round of applause. And before I start, we're going to do like a public service announcement with Kaitlyn. Hang on one second.
So I talked to most of you as you walked in the door and I jumped on you. If you are in the Bobby Jones patient registry, unfortunately the registry platform has to close because the investors were no longer able to support it. So what we are going to do is work at an insanely fast speed to turn around a publication in the next 2 weeks. So we're going to pull the data together and try to write something together. But what I need from anyone that's in the registry is their participant code. And there's stuff on the tables that tells you how to do that if you have an account. If this makes no sense to you, just find me or email me. I'm more than happy to set up a time to literally walk you through it, because it's definitely worth it to me, because I want to make sure your data are associated with you, and I don't have access to that data right now because it is anonymized in the system. It was a real wake-up call. It was like I got thrown some ice water on me when we found this out. So any minute you can spare to maybe talk to me about that. I want to make sure that your data are included and put into this project that we're working on. Importantly, I also want to move on to the next steps. And knowing who's coming with us kind of helps us figure out how we're going to plan and build the next iteration of the registry. So I think I got everything. If anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Okay, so I think I know almost everyone in the room, but I'm Dorothy Poppe. I'm the executive director of the Bobby Jones Chiari-Syringomyelia Foundation. And I know the last time we had an update was in 2023. So my thought was that at this meeting, what I'd like to do is just kind of tell you how our goals went forward in 2023. And then at the next meeting, I'm going to talk about where we're going in 2024, because it's important to complete your goals. So the Chiari Surgical Success Scale, which we sort of talked about at the last meeting, we were trying to get it off the ground. We were trying a new model for funding a prospective multi-center trial, which generally speaking is really super expensive to do, because you're talking about having multiple institutions do the same surgery, or it could be a clinical trial or whatever it is. But we decided we wanted to do this surgical trial, and out of it, what we hope to get is a tool that will decide which symptoms get better when you have surgery and which don't. Now, for everybody, some people will say it will, it won't. Well, this is going to be, right now, 18 different institutions have already started working with us on this, and we're talking about Stanford, University of Utah, University of Michigan, Johns Hopkins. We have a lot of the big names already working on the study, which is great. But we said there's this hole where patients don't always go to an academic center for surgery. And what's happening with those patients? Because if we don't include something about that, then we're really not seeing the whole picture. So this study is unique because we're including some private practice participants to get that data as well, so that now you're talking about this is very different than just academic centers doing it. Then the third thing was, well, okay, that's going on in the US, what's happening globally? Now, to get a global participant into a multi-center trial is really hard to do, and we're bringing on our first global participant this year. So we're accomplishing all the things that we wanted to do to get this study off the ground. It's rolling now. Why is it unique? How about the fact that a not-for-profit is managing the data for all of these institutions? Not done. It's usually siloed and kept in a single institution. So we're really proud of the fact that we dug our heels in and wanted that to happen, and it is happening. So this study also includes pediatric and adult patients. What will happen out of it is I think there are going to end up being 2 different publications, just looking at some of the preliminary results kind of thing. I think it's going to end up being an adult paper and a pediatric paper, but the evidence is going to be really good because it's multi-center prospective information. So we'll see how this goes by the end of 2024. Also in 2023, we started a craniocervical instability question. And the big problem with craniocervical instability in the neurosurgical world is to fuse or not to fuse. That's right. I mean, you all know about this, to fuse or not to fuse. So when we went to the same groups of people that we're working with on this other scale, they said, you can't do that study because you either have people who believe it or don't believe it, number one, and where do you start? And really the thing what we found out is that nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody, people were using different definitions for how to define craniocervical instability. So when is it craniocervical instability? If you're a naysayer or if you're a believer? If you're going to do the study right, because you could do the study with all these people or all these people, but if you do that, you're going to get that answer. So the goal was, how do we get both groups to agree to come together, to do a study, and decide on a definition, which is where you have to start if you're going to do the study. We got them all in the room. Both sides presented their cases. What came out of that initial presentation was the fact that we really do need to do this Delphi process to define what craniocervical instability is, but also that it seems to be a different animal in pediatrics than it is in adults. So out of that meeting, we now have the first meeting done where the pediatric population groups got together and they're writing up their publication on what the agreed on craniocervical instability metrics are. In May, the adults are going to do the same thing. Once we have an agreed upon definition, you can then start writing the protocols for the study so that then you can have multi-center prospective study to get good evidence from various groups, and there will be some kind of an answer in the publication. So that's where we are with that, and I think that's a huge step forward. Because of this, we were just on the Dr. Fraser Henderson paper. That was a labor of love every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Meeting with the group to get together, but the paper was just published in Neurosurgical Review, Craniocervical Instability in Patients with Ehlers-Danlos Syndromes, Outcomes and Analysis Following Occipital Craniocervical Fusion, and we are one of the authors on the paper. So we're moving the needle forward again with trying to get something in the literature that people can then go back and look at. It is a retrospective study. It's not A or B evidence, but it's something that's going forward. Also, we were asked to be on the Chiari Guidelines Committee. So the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, which is big peer groups, the younger group, and the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, which is the older dog neurosurgeons, have a joint group that gets together and they review all the literature that's out there. They put together a group of questions and then they do a literature search and then divide you up into groups and go through and look at what is the evidence that's currently in the literature so that we can answer some of these questions that were posed prior to looking at the literature. And we were the first nonprofit group ever to be asked to sit on one of those committees, which was a huge thing. So we got to see the process, we got to participate in the process, we got to see the outcomes, and now that publication is out on the Congress of Neurological Surgeons site. Bobby Jones CSF is acknowledged for the work on that, and it's pushing the new studies to go forward because the evidence isn't great in the literature. There are a lot of just single studies, single groups, so we're changing that. And because we were on that committee, we've now been asked to work on the best practices of neurosurgical groups now. What's going on? Since there isn't really good evidence in the literature, what are the best practices for going forward with this? And that's for neurosurgeons. But we are participating in that, and we're going to continue to work with the groups and make sure that these different disorders, diseases, however you want to classify it, are still in the spotlight, and we're not giving up. So 2023 was a great year. I can't wait to see what goes on in 2024. But without you and without your support, it doesn't happen. So I want to just thank you all for doing what you've done to make it go this far. Please join Nancy down here and become an advocate. Find some kind of a role for yourself, because it really feels great when you see everything going forward and you're part of it. I encourage that, and New Hope, New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I want to point out, all this research is so important, because what happens, doctors, you get frustrated, you go to a doctor, he doesn't believe this or that, or she doesn't believe this or that. It's because they need the research to validate these things. So many people in the medical profession need to have the research to show that, yes, this is what you're saying it is, or this is, you need to do this because of this. They need to have the research behind it. So this research is really important. And that brings us to our speaker tonight, Dr. Chip Norris. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Chip Norris. He is a PhD. He's a tenured professor of medicine in the Department of Regenerative Medicine and Cell Biology at MUSC. The Norris Lab is a multidisciplinary environment with students and postdocs using various genetic, molecular, biochemical, and biomechanical tools to understand common and rare connective tissue diseases. The lab has spent the past 25 years understanding the genetics of various syndromic and non-syndromic cardiovascular diseases, such as mitral valve prolapse, aortic valve diseases, and cardiomyopathies. Recently, we identified a very strong candidate gene for hypermobile EDS. Armed with a large hEDS patient registry, 4 clinical coordinators, and one of the largest hEDS research labs, the lab is exerting a concerted effort towards understanding causes of hEDS and associated comorbidities. Using state-of-the-art CRISPR-Cas9 mediated genome editing, they generate mouse models of human diseases to study how connective tissue diseases initiate and progress. It's fascinating, and it's so important, and I'm so happy to introduce Dr. Chip Norris.
So thank you, Nancy, and thank you to everyone here for CSF. This is where I actually sort of first started understanding aspects of Ehlers-Danlos, and with Jen's family was the first one that I really got to see the challenges and struggles. What I'll do today is hopefully provide you some hope. We're supposed to be hopeful today. and hopefully for the whole year, right? And I'm going to talk about some research updates from our lab, really focusing on, of course, the hypermobile subtype. I'll talk briefly about some other the subtypes of Ehlers-Danlos as well. But I wanted everybody's sort of very curious about the gene that we identified, and we've been sort of pigeonholed into this. You're only a genetics lab, and we're not. We're so much more, and so genetics is, of course, a large focus of what we do, but recognizing what needs to happen for this disease, we need to do more than just genetics. And so what I'll show you is hopefully the path that we're paving and how that can actually make a difference in the lives of people with this disease. I'm going to start off this whole story. I wasn't I didn't know anything about Ehlers-Danlos really 5 years ago. This really started with Courtney, who most people know Courtney. Courtney, yay, right? And so this is really about her story and her legacy, and we've accomplished so much that I'll go through, but so much so that MUSC brought a film crew down to highlight us in a national campaign. Now, I don't know if this video or movie is ever going to go anywhere, besides like within the walls of MUSC. Yeah,
everywhere.
Yes.
24/7.
So if you have seen it, I apologize. I'm going to show it to you as my first slide. It is really I think sets the stage for the other things I'm going to talk about.
From a young age, I've always loved science. I was interested in pursuing a career in research. When I got into MUSC for graduate school, I started my PhD, and I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I met Dr. Norris.
So she asked me what I did, and I said I work on heart valve disease. And she revealed that she had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
I was diagnosed with hEDS when I was around 19 years old, but there's no direct treatment and really not a lot of research going on into why this is happening or what we can do about it. Most days I have been able to manage it, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm in pain basically every second of every day.
I asked her what the gene was, and she said nobody knows.
He was like, well, do you want to try and find the gene? Find the gene, we can do that. We started with a large family that had hEDS to kind of narrow down and find a genetic cause. From that, we were able to have a small list of genes that we then narrowed down to one causative gene for hEDS. With the genetic registry that we developed, we found this mutation in other patients and other families as well. This was the first gene discovery for hEDS.
MUSC really enabled us to become a world-leading institution with a focus on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Even as a student, I always had a seat at the table. To have leadership and administration listen to someone who was, just a PhD student is really rare and unique. It takes a long time to make a scientific discovery. This process is slow, so to have such a big discovery so early in my scientific career is kind of unheard of. It made me really excited for every next step along the way.
That's sort of how we began with Courtney's journey. And from that, we've, if you just take the time to listen to patients, maybe some really good things can happen. And so our approach to the really clinical aspects of Ehlers-Danlos and the research needs of EDS really have always started with the patient. And the need to listen to them, both at the physician level and at the scientist level. And only through this sort of what I view as a three-legged stool, patient, scientist, physician, can you really only through this lens can you make an impact for patients. And so the overall, what I'm going to go through is there's a lot that we've done, and I'd like to try to hit the highlights. And so I hope to leave you feeling hopeful and excited about where the research is going. This is the overall structure. I'll talk about diagnostics. The diagnostic journey, as all of you know, is really challenging. We'll talk a little bit about the genetics, the proteomics, and defining what hEDS really is. I think that we're still in need of a refined definition. I'll talk about sort of research areas that we're really focusing on and excited about. Education, so critical, medical schools, nursing, health professions, and how do we go about changing aspects of education that's actually going to trickle down and make an impact for patients. I think you have to start with education. And then we'll talk about patient empowerment. We're only one lab, and there's not many of us. There's not many research labs studying Ehlers-Danlos. It's the most common connective tissue disease in the world. We need more research. How do we do that? I'll tell you how we're doing it. And then end with the clinical care and the establishment of the EDS Institute. I don't need to belabor this. Everybody here knows what Ehlers-Danlos is. It's a group of connective tissue diseases sharing features of joint hypermobility, skin hyperextensibility, and tissue fragility. The subtypes are separated phenotypically and genetically for the most part. And it's also viewed as sort of globally viewed as an extracellular matrix or collagen disorder. All are considered rare. All the different subtypes are considered rare, except for the hypermobile subtype. I'm not in the camp of believing that the hEDS subtype is rare. In fact, I think it's very common, and the numbers are conservative at best and underestimate what this disease actually is. This is sort of the breakdown of the genetics. You can see that each of the different subtypes of EDS are listed over here on the left, and other genes that are associated with it on the right. And you'll notice that the hEDS subtype gene is unknown. We know much more about this now. So if we start with just a general definition, it is the most common type of EDS. It affects an estimated 1 in 500, it's about 1 in 492 if you one of the recent papers. It's autosomal dominant, runs in families. It's poorly defined, it's complex, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why physicians tend to steer away from it, because they don't know what it is and they don't know what to do to help you. It is a broad spectrum disease impacting multiple body systems with several comorbid conditions. Females typically present more severely than males, and certainly more commonly than males, and phenotype worsens around puberty. This sort of gives us clues into maybe some of the mechanisms that we need to focus on. The research into the underlying genetic causes is lacking. And most research today really lacks supporting biology. In fact, most papers on EDS are, I think it's nice to get papers out. It's nice to have survey data, but we need supporting multidisciplinary approaches to these studies. So we're working hard to change this. Due to lack of a marker, EDS, as you all know, is restricted to a clinical checklist, which isn't, in my opinion, and in a lot of other EDS patients' opinion, not the best. And of course, lack of awareness, education leads to significant delays in diagnosis. So what is EDS? This is, Courtney drew this, made this great image. And you don't have to read all the different things in it, but you can see how many different aspects of Ehlers-Danlos there are, and how many organ systems it affects. This is what it is. obviously navigating life with EDS presents a lot of challenges, but it also can provide incentive. And in the end, we need patients to engage so we can understand how to solve this problem. There aren't any good textbooks or journal articles really describing what this is. You have to listen to the patients. So, briefly, going over our current research and clinical projects. Genetics. Courtney mentioned it in the video. We identified a gene for hEDS. We actually identified a gene family that was had an increased incidence of variance in EDS populations compared to about 100,000 controls. And it accounts for at most 30% of the patients. So there are multiple genes. We've known this for a while. And so one of the things that we're working on is population genetics. We've done a first round GWAS, which is a genome-wide association study, looking for common variants that together can define the disease phenotype and whether or not those common variants are represented at a higher degree in the hEDS population than controls. Courtney's finished the first round GWAS of that, and the second round GWAS for replication of the findings in the first cohort is ongoing. So there will likely be some things that are exciting there. As far as the paper goes, on our initial genetic discovery, I will tell you it spent 13 months at New England Journal of Medicine, which is the highest medical journal in the land, and 6 editorial reviews, 4 reviewers, and eventually it got rejected, even though, one reviewer didn't even review it, 2 reviewers accepted it, and 1 was just kind of a pain in the ass. So it was very disappointing to us. So anyways, but you have to move on. And so we're getting additional information, and we're going to be sending it to Nature Medicine in the next month or 2. So, we'll see what happens. So what we want, in order to study Ehlers-Danlos, we took our genetic discovery and made an animal model. We have to have some sort of mechanism to actually study the disease. And so we use CRISPR-Cas9, which is genome editing, which is a very popular molecular technique nowadays that allows us to essentially cut the DNA, insert what we want, close the DNA back up, and make a mouse. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's essentially what it is. It's an amazing tool. And so we were able to introduce the exact mutation we found in the patients into mice, and then look at, do they have a connective tissue phenotype that models the hEDS phenotype? And it does. So that validated that our genetic variant that we identified was causative to the disease. So we're really trying to understand, what does this gene do? How does it interact? What does it interact with? And how does it alter connective tissues? So that's sort of the genetics and the molecular aspects, but we also, and so the genetics could potentially be a diagnostic tool down the road, but we also need to develop other additional diagnostic tools. So we established a collaboration with the Ehlers-Danlos Society, where they sent us 150 serum and plasma samples for us to see if there's something in the blood that is unique in an EDS patient compared to HSD, compared to controls. And so we've completed 3 different types of proteomic style approaches, and those have to go through replication, but there are some interesting things in there. So I'm just giving you a bunch of teasers today. So, and what's important about these biomarkers, I think they're going to be more informative than the actual genetic makeup, and we can talk about that later. The power of having an animal model, though, based on a genetic cause is that it allows us a platform to study therapies and, test things that may be of benefit for patients. Comorbid conditions, mast cell activation syndrome is really, really hard on these patients, and very little is known about it in the context of EDS. And so, we're really interested in understanding what mast cell activation syndrome looks like in these patients and how can we stop it. And I just want to give you a little slide. This is really cool. This Courtney took this. So what you see here these are cells in a dish. These cells are human mast cells, not obtained from an EDS patient, but obtained from a non-EDS patient. And we have the ability in the lab to actually force them to degranulate. And as many of you probably know, mast cells are releasing histamines and tryptase, and this is causing, inflammatory reactions that are not fun. And so I just want to give you the sense, this is a video, I'm going to run it, and just the sense of how fast these cells degranulate. And you can think about it in your own bodies when they get hit with the stimuli that they don't like. So hopefully it'll run. So you can see them sort of shrink, and then can you see these little granules come out? So this is a period of like seconds. It's really incredible to see how fast these cells respond. And so we want to know if we can stabilize these. But we need to understand the mechanisms of how it's working. Clinical collaborations. We have 8 or so IRBs that Victoria has put together. And so developing these clinical collaborations between dermatology, getting skin biopsies, neurosurgery, tethered cord biopsies, orthopedics, psychology. We have a clinical trial right now in vagus nerve stimulation to see if that sort of calms down the autonomic dysfunction and the GI manifestations in patients. And then, of course, demographics, surveys, and chart reviews, which I'll talk a little bit about. Gaining clinical information is really critical, and you can help by completing a survey. Patients always ask, how can I help? Well, you can complete a survey. You can complete one of our surveys. You can complete one of the CSF's surveys. It's really important for us to gain more and more data. And this is just an example of the interest that we've received. And so what you'll see are 2 different surveys. The red arrows are highlighting the 2 surveys. When you add those patients up, it's 14,000 patients. That's an incredible number of patients. 2 separate surveys, 2 separate purposes. So these are the largest surveys by far ever conducted for Ehlers-Danlos. And I'll show you some of the data. The first clinical survey we did was looking at a variety of things that we'll go through. It was basically 2,000 patients, and if you look here, not surprisingly, because this was already known, white women are the most commonly diagnosed. The family history, 70% have a family history. These patients underwent a self-report clinical questionnaire. They're pretty straightforward. This was our genetic one, I think, right? Yeah. And so when we started this whole thing out, we didn't really plan on collecting survey information. We just wanted to collect DNA. But we decided we would ask some general questions. So these are very general. Like you'll notice there's a question about, do you have gastrointestinal manifestations? There's a lot there within that one question, but we were sort of the 30,000 foot view. So these were the different questions that we asked. And here are some of the results. So this, once again, is our EDS person with all the different comorbidities. And what you'll see is over here is sort of the list of the diagnostic phenotypes, those criteria that are in the diagnostic checklist. And you'll see the prevalence of female, male, and non-binary. And obviously things like chronic pain, joint subluxations are the most common. When you look into comorbid conditions, what's interesting is the GI manifestations are really, really high, 81%. Yet these comorbid conditions are not included in the aspects of the diagnostic criteria. So, I think that parsing through all of this data is really important to understand how we may be able to revise some of the clinical guidelines to include some of the findings that we have from the patients. There are interesting things that are the females are more commonly diagnosed with these conditions versus the males. Also, the number of conditions is more in females versus males. So 11 versus 9 medical conditions, that's a lot. We were then able to actually take this, and we wanted to ask the question of, is EDS just one sort of condition, or can it be dissected into different subtypes? And so the survey analysis actually let us do that. And what we identified were 3 independent clusters. There are overlap between the clusters, but there are unique aspects of the clusters that make us pause about how EDS has been presented and been defined. There's one thing of interest really is if we just look at cluster 3, it's this group of patients that really have a high prevalence of neurosurgical or neurological conditions, Chiari and tethered cord. In this cluster, 61% and 55% had Chiari and tethered cord versus the other 2 clusters. So you can see that patients with Chiari don't fit in the other clusters. I think this is important. This is important not only because it's important for the patient, it's important for the physician, the diagnosing physician. It's also important for our studies going forward to determine whether or not there might actually be a marker that segregates with the specific subtypes. How great would that be if you knew that you fell in subtype, cluster 3, and your children, we had a marker and we could be predictive of that phenotype that we knew that they were going to progress to, or there's a high likelihood they were going to progress to. So I think it's really important to do these clinical surveys. You can only do them with these, in my opinion, the more patients you have, the more power you have to understand what's going on. And really from these studies, it really motivates considering revising clinical criteria for accuracy and depth in the patient. The second clinical survey is, now we have 5,000 completed? 4,700. So I'll show you some data on 3,900 patients. In this survey, 97% of survey respondents are female. And these questions we asked were a little bit different. What was interesting is that on average, in 4,000 patients, average of 22 years from symptom onset to EDS diagnosis. 22 years. I mean, that heart preaching to the choir. On average, EDS patients saw 7 different medical specialists in the past year. 39% of patients had an inpatient hospital stay. 30% of patients traveled more than 300 miles for care. 76% have paid out of pocket for specialists not covered by their health insurance. And 45% of patients spend more than 5 hours a week coordinating medical care. This is information that's needed out there to educate the community. How can we address these issues? How can we alleviate all those things that we just saw? by you guys. You're part of the solution. You know, we need patient engagement equals patient empowerment. Diverse participation in research, including underrepresented groups affected by EDS. We need patients coming into the lab. We need to do outreach like Nancy and Dorothy and the groups do. Online surveys, mail-in samples to make research participation accessible. Some people can't travel. Public outreach, lab, we do a number of lab Q&As and lay public seminars to break down barriers in science communication around EDS research. What we do in the lab is incredibly complicated to explain. It's hard to understand. It's a different language. Breaking that down so the lay public can understand what we're doing is not easy to do a lot of times. So, but we need to work on getting the public outreach there. Patient integration, patient scientists, and I'll tell you about this. This is how we reshape science and medicine through patient equity and inclusion. How do we implement this? And this isn't just specific to EDS. This needs to happen across the board in various diseases. We could be really pushing the boundaries of so many other diseases if we just listen to the patients. There's Roman. Right there. There's Victoria. So we really felt like we wanted to reshape what it meant to be a scientist. Patient representation is needed. Many basic scientists like me, I don't have the perspective that you do. So I need to listen and learn. So we invite patients into the lab and clinic to grow a community. So we started this a few years ago, the intern program. And this is an incredible opportunity. There are so many young patients who want to go into science and either don't think they can because they have a disability or don't know how to. This provides them that opportunity. When we started this whole thing, a donor reached out to me and said, I'll give you $50,000. I'm excited about your research. It was the first donation I had ever received. And it was an incredible amount of money. I didn't have to write a grant. He was just excited about the research. And you look at $50,000 and in a research lab, and it's really not that much money. It doesn't go very far. One technician is going to cost that for 1 year. And so we wanted to make better use of the money. And so we looked at our registry. We discussed how can we really make an impact? How can we go beyond? How can we have a better return on this investment? And so that's when we decided we would have develop this intern program nationally, a national call for patients with EDS to come into the lab. There were 2 criteria, and that's it. One is you had to have EDS. Second was that you had to have a commitment to studying, to further studying Ehlers-Danlos in the future. We needed to build a community of scientists, physicians, healthcare providers, advocates, whatever, to build this community. It's too small. So we did. The first year we had 25 applications. We selected 4. Roman was one of them. And now he's a first-year MD PhD student. So that was the $50,000. That was the summer. It was a summer internship, 10 weeks, and the money was done. Until a foundation reached out to us in North Carolina who was interested in funding interesting educational opportunities and said, well, we hear what you're doing with this patient scientist concept. It's really cool. we want to talk to you about it. And so they came down and they said, we'll give you about $200,000 to do it over 3 years and grow it bigger. And that was like, this is awesome. So, so we did. The second year we had 45 applications for 4 interns. The third year we had 70 applications. This year I think we had 74, right? At least based on the
Something like that.
yeah. For 5 or 6 spots, right? It's super competitive. The word got out then, and then the Home Shopping Network reached out to us and said, "This is really cool what you're doing about patient scientists. More people should be doing this. We want you to build it bigger." I said, "We can't build it bigger. Courtney's gonna shoot me because there's just not enough room to have a dozen interns. But we're also rejecting 60 some interns every summer. We want to give them an opportunity." And so we thought, let's just do this thing year round. Short little internships, 3 days, 5 days, maybe a couple weeks, and let these students come in and see what we're doing. Work with us. You don't have to have experience. And so we implemented that. Emma's here as part of this fellowship for a few days. That way we can train so many more people. So after, I think this is current, no, within 6 years we will have trained more than 55 patient scientists. They'll go on to get into graduate school. In fact, we had one of our previous interns just got into graduate school today. And by doing that, they're going to go and teach and go into nursing or medicine or research, and then they will expand the knowledge. They'll teach the people, the other students, what Ehlers-Danlos is. These kids are incredibly bright. This is sort of the breakdown of the last 2 years. It's about from 100. We've had 200 total applications. And if you just look down at the average GPA, it's 3.6. I would never have gotten into this program because I did not have a 3.6 in college. But that's really, really remarkable. 28% want to go into PhDs, 25% want to go into MDs, 12% MD PhDs, 15% are unsure. I mean, those are incredible numbers. So, yeah, this is what I think people are going to most remember me by. Let's move on to transforming clinical care and how we partnership with various MUSC physicians. Obviously, there's a huge gap in clinical care. EDS is more than just being hypermobile. It's not a rare disease, and we do know early diagnosis can lead to lifestyle changes. Physical therapy is incredibly helpful. Susan's here, she sees it firsthand. And so we need physicians and clinicians to know. It requires multiple specialists. It's not limited to doctors. It requires nursing and care staff. And of course, multiple people in the family are often affected. So we need coordinated continuity of care. Siloed healthcare doesn't work. In one of our registries, we have a blank space for patients to fill out. And this is what one of them said. The personal and financial burden of self-coordinating complex care in a medical system that does not understand and sometimes outright denies the existence of hEDS has been very high, and it's increasing over time. My life trajectory is considerably different than it might have been without this disorder, and has become, for better or worse, a defining aspect of my relationship with others, work, and myself. I spend at least 15 to 20% of my disposable income on EDS-related care that is either undercovered or completely uncovered, even with excellent insurance. We need to do better for these patients, and we need to transform clinical care. Multidisciplinary care is needed. This is just sort of a diagram saying patient is at the center. Here's all the different specialists that need to be there. You can't just come to MUSC to have your spine fused by Dr. Patel and then go someplace else to have your GI manifestations, go someplace else to have your mast cells looked at. It's not feasible, and it shouldn't happen that way. So we'll just go to, we know what the problems are, we'll go to the needs. We need this integrated clinical and research one-stop shop for EDS. Cancer institutes, every single state has a cancer institute that has integrated clinical and research needs. We need every state to have an EDS institute like that. This will improve health, reduce hospital time, give us really a healthier country, decrease healthcare burden, and improve quality of life. And so we're really trying to push regional institutes as destination centers for EDS patients. And so this is sort of our working roadmap. I can tell you where we are with establishing. We've been working on this for 2 years. Now it's over 2 years, I believe. Developing an institute is incredibly complicated within an already existing academic center. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. So we have received all the approvals needed to develop the EDS Institute at MUSC. We have done interviews for the medical director and the director of primary care. Offers have been sent, and they're just leadership at MUSC is in negotiations back and forth with these individuals. With that, with the hire of the medical director, there is a committed hire for 3 or 4 different specialists. Those will likely fall under the GI, cardio, pain, and allergy immunology realms to really hit the major aspects of this disease. So that's paired part and parcel with our research team. I've been asked to send a template for the size of the research needs that we need, the number of faculty we need. I've requested 20,000 square feet and a new construction that will hopefully happen along Calhoun. So all good. I don't have time to go into the implementation plans. I'm happy to share this if Dorothy wants to share this. I'm happy to share it. I think I'm allowed to share it. Not sure. I might need to check on that first. I wanted to update you on some educational progress because it starts at the education level. How many people here have seen physicians who dismiss their EDS issues? Yeah, right? It's sort of goes against the Hippocratic Oath. Research isn't impactful without education, and so how are we educating the next generation of physicians? This is what I pulled this from the connective tissue block that first-year medical students are taught here at MUSC. I pulled this 2 years ago. This is what they learn about EDS. I'm sure you will not be happy to see what this is. It's basically EDS is a benign disease that's rare, stretchy skin, joints are loose, and you have translucent skin. So congratulations. If your physician was trained with this slide, you need to run away. Go see somebody else. This year, because of what we've been able to do in the lab and our outreach and advocacy, we have succeeded in changing the medical school curriculum in the state of South Carolina. So I think that's huge. Roman, you need to tell me how it's.
We get to MSK, I'll let you know.
All right. How it's changed and whether or not it's a nice step. I'm biased, and it's probably not going to be as radical of a change that I'd like, but we'll wait and see what they actually do. This is South Carolina. How do we make this happen across the United States? The way you make it happen across the United States is you push AAMC, which is the body of individuals who make questions on the board's exams. You get questions about Ehlers-Danlos on the board exams, you force the hand of every medical campus across the United States to teach it. And so, I guess Becca's not here, who took step one. 3 questions were added this year to step 1. So 3 more than none, which is it's a huge step in the right direction. Now, what they look at is EDS really a major healthcare burden? And so I'll talk a little bit about this. Is it a financial burden? We know it's a physical and mental burden among the patient population, right? We know this. What about financial burden? And so a thorough analysis of this has not been done. Jane Schubert at Penn is on the leading edge of this, and I'll present some of her data, which is really telling. And once this paper gets out, I think we're going to see a lot more movement. Is it a major healthcare burden? Of course it is, right? It's logical. Any disease that affects 1 in 500 people is going to be a huge medical healthcare burden. $20,000 out of pocket cost per patient per year. This is $13 billion annually out of pocket. On average, $32,000 is covered by insurance, $21.7 billion annually. Combined insurance cost plus out of pocket is costing the economy almost $35 billion. That's bananas. So one would assume that with a huge crisis, as I view EDS as a crisis, there would be funding for Ehlers-Danlos research, right? To offset this, we need to find a solution so we can reduce that $35 billion a year problem. EDS fits within most NIH institutes. NIH is the major funder for all of academic and clinical research in the United States. There are 27 institutes within NIH. Those boxed in red are ones where EDS disease would fit, aspects of the disease itself. Courtney and I had the opportunity a few weeks ago with Dr. Patel to actually have an NIH-wide webinar where we addressed all 27 institutes. It was the first time I think any team of scientists, patient, and physician had engaged all institutes under one webinar, which was incredible. We'll see if it actually results in anything, but it was incredible to have that opportunity. Funding for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. If you see it, it says really small bar right there. $8 million. This is the funding for the entire duration of NIH existence. $8 million. It's nothing. It's crazy compared to these other chronic illness fundings. Compared to other connective tissue diseases, it lags behind Marfan syndrome and OI, which are tenfold more rare than EDS. Funding is misaligned with disease impact. We need to do better. We know that funding leads to therapies and treatment. This is just an example of MS, and when a drug was developed to treat MS, you'll see these spikes in funding. It's immediate. So we need to get these papers out on what we're doing on the diagnostic experiments as well as the genetics, and try to engage in developing new therapies. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're hopefully leveraging some AI technologies. We can't solve this problem alone. How many scientists study EDS? We're one lab. There are over 1.3 million scientists in the world. That's a lot of people studying things. If you just restrict that to medical and health academic studies, that's 130,000 scientists. Doesn't include trainees or physicians. How many study connective tissue diseases? This is greater than 10,000 people worldwide. How many study EDS? 4. I mean, you know, it's crazy. How do we fix this? Funding and tools. We're working on the funding with NIH, and I'm optimistic that things will change. I'll show you why I think that in a minute. Tools. We need more people studying EDS. So we developed this initiative where we would develop animal models for every subtype of EDS, and we would offer them for free to the scientific community. You don't have to just study hEDS to learn stuff about connective tissues. The other subtypes of EDS, knowing other aspects of what's going on in other subtypes of EDS can be informative to what's going on in hEDS. So this is where we are with that. We're making 15 different lines. As you know, the other subtypes of EDS have defined genetic markers. And so we're leveraging that to make these animals. And these are all done by CRISPR-Cas9. We've now completed 10 lines. It's incredible. One research lab is making this happen. Once they're available, we cryopreserve the sperm. We'll get into how the sperm is isolated. But somebody asked me that earlier. Was it you, Nancy? Yeah. And then we can ship these out all around the world to researchers who are interested in doing this. Where do we go from here? Next steps for progress. Large population studies. We're already doing it. Basic science research support for genetics and biology. We need to build those EDS research communities. It's what we're trying to do with our intern program. And of course, through this incorporation of patient scientists. EDS institutes and centers are so needed in NIH support. This is our call to action. Every year, the last 2 years, we've been asked to provide wording for the MUSC Federal Agenda Book. This is a book that describes initiatives or pillars of the MUSC research and clinical community that the president then goes and lobbies on Capitol Hill. This was done last year, or maybe it was 2 years. Yeah, last year. And it made it into, the lobbying was a success. It made it into the Committee on Appropriations for the House of Representatives. It also passed the Senate. This is some of the wording here. If we just go down to this last paragraph, it says, the committee, this is the House of Representatives, encourages NIH to evaluate the best approaches to establishing multi-institution centers that can serve as regional institutes to spur earlier diagnosis, improve treatment, care, education, and mechanistic understanding of hEDS. We've asked for an annual $50 million bolus that NIH is supposed to use to fund these institutes and centers. I do know that the Institute of NIAMS, which is the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal Disease and Skin Diseases, now has EDS as one of its top priority research initiatives. They will, when you submit a grant to NIH, it gets reviewed and gets scored. They have a funding pay line which is dictated by that score. And so if your grant falls outside of that score, you don't get funded. What's unique about having EDS as one of their top initiatives is that they will pick up the grant if it falls beyond the score, the pay line score. So there's a really good opportunity for additional researchers to get funding, and so focusing on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so I think part and parcel with that is our animal models going to these scientists who then can get additional funding for EDS research. I was asked this year to provide, once again, we're going to keep hitting them over the head because politicians are kind of stupid. So we have to keep hitting them over the head. And so we once again put wording into our MUSC federal agenda to encourage the money to actually flow to NIH. So in summary, I hope what you took from this is that we're trying to reshape medicine, and this is happening through patient-led innovation. We're trying to change the perception of EDS through education, awareness, and research. We need congressional support. I think this is going to happen. I remain optimistic. We recognize, I have a lot of EDS patient scientists in the lab, and I know sometimes it's hard to have hope. And, no one listens. Just know that we're listening and doing everything we can. We're more than just a genetic lab. Nothing of significance is ever accomplished alone. I don't really do much. I maybe listen and try to guide. Really, the people on this list are those who make everything possible. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions, and thank you for the invitation.